All right, good evening, everybody. I am Fred Campagna, along with Emily Gagnon.
We're
Am I
doing
saying
it.
that right? Is that like proper French Canadian pronunciation of your name?
Would be Gagnon.
Gagnon.
But I
I took
say
4 years of French or 3 years of
you
French in
were
high school.
very close. I
It
really
was, yeah.
appreciate the effort on
I
that.
did
A
poorly
plus.
in it. So Emily actually challenged me with opening the show tonight, and that's what I came up with. So thanks for joining us this evening. Plenty, Emily, to talk about in the sports world. So much happening over the weekend. Play-in tournament starts on Tuesday for the Hawks, the most mediocre team in the history of mediocre teams.
I mean, you couldn't have said that better. They're 500. Yet
Exactly.
Again.
Like,
they
and
have
they've
lived
been-
at 500 all season. Literally,
Right?
that is where they're comfortable. Their
Yeah.
comfort zone is being mediocre.
Well, if they win one, then they'll move on and take on the Celtics.
Yeah, you're Celtics.
If they win the first one, if they win the second one, they'll move on and take on the Bucks. And if they don't win either one, then they go home.
That's pretty simple, right?
They go golf. Yeah. So yeah, very very uninspiring, I guess you could say, season from the Hawks. Is that a good word for it?
No, I mean, I think, yes, I think that's a very good word for it, but I want to go back to mediocre because this
Okay.
is certainly not what the front office envisioned going into the season, especially not when they got DeJounte Murray. They definitely thought that DeJounte Murray and Trae Young together were going to solve a lot of problems that they had last season, right? And really it started for me during the playoffs last year when the Hawks and the Heat played, and the Heat contained Trae so well. He averaged only 15 points during that series. I think it was 22 shots made. I mean, it was so unlike Trae Young. And it was because of how physical Miami is. And they're still so physical, and they're still so good on defense. As a matter of fact, today, Quinn Snyder said they are the best defensive team in the league. That's how he describes them. They're super well coached with Spoelstra. So they struggled last season. The Hawks saw that, and they said, okay, like, what are we going to do when Trae Young can't shoot the ball? So then they brought in DeJounte Murray, and we're still, very thick into problems. And I think a lot of times it takes some time, and maybe one season is not enough.
Yeah.
Maybe they will figure it out, but will Trae Young be here next season to figure it out? That's something we could talk about later. But tomorrow, Fred, I will say it right now, and then I'll let you tell me how you feel about it. I do not expect the Hawks to win in Miami. It's going to be an explosive environment. It always is down there, especially during this time of the year. So they're going to be in like a super hostile environment, which to say in the NBA, like what is really hostile, but it'll be loud. But from one end of the court to the next, there's one thing about Miami that impresses me, and it's truly there's no drop off. I mean, they're so well conditioned.
Yeah.
So the Hawks, I expect them to lose, and then I expect them to come back here Friday night, State Farm Arena, and play the winner of the 9-10 seed, which would be either Toronto or Chicago. And we'll see what they got in their tank on Friday. But tomorrow, I do not expect a win.
Okay. I also don't expect them to win, but it sounds like you think they're going to lose by 15 to 25 points. I think it might be closer than that. I think if they can withstand the early part of the game, if it's still somewhat of a game midway through the third quarter, they could be right there. They might even steal it. Now, you mentioned the environment down in Miami. They always arrive late. Even they were arriving late to Eastern Conference finals games last year against the Celtics. So eventually they get going, but this is a play-in game. They're not used to being in the play-in situation down in Miami. So the fans might not have as much optimism about this playoff run as they have in years past. So we'll see what type of environment it is down there. I know Jimmy Butler is very confident. He's already talking about that they're going to win, and he's talking about making a deep run and getting back to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think that he, for one, is putting the cart a little bit ahead of the horse, and that's some bulletin board material right there. I think for the Hawks is that Butler's basically being like, well, after we win on Tuesday, we're going to go up and beat the Celtics and then move on from there. So he seems a little bit overconfident to me, and I still think the Hawks they're pretty much the same team that made the Eastern Conference Finals run. They don't have Herter anymore, but they do have some guys on that team who can play playoff basketball. They did not show it at all this year. I don't know what kind of fit DeJounte Murray was. I know that the Hawks defensively were atrocious this year. That might be putting it kindly. I was looking at some advanced stats for our next topic, which will be about Trae Young. And I noticed the one theme was that the Hawks players individually, defensive rating, terrible.
Bad.
Yeah, not good. Now, Miami's not an incredible offensive team, so this might not be the worst matchup for the Hawks as far as that goes. But yeah, so if they don't get it done in Miami, they should come back based on their win one, lose one, or lose one, win one all season. They should come back and win later on in the week against either the Bulls or the Raptors.
My thing is, like, with postseason play, Fred, like, I think they're going to be the same team that we've seen all year. It's not going to all of a sudden just change, right? So to your point, yes, like 1-1, win one, lose one.
Yeah.
It would be so much easier if they just went ahead and got the win in Miami. But speaking of late crowds that you mentioned, Atlanta's a late crowd too. I mean,
very, very much so, yeah.
So
and
they have something in common.
Right. Yeah, and Atlanta tends to be a crowd that features a lot of opposing teams' jerseys.
Oh my
And
goodness! You're
State
not lying
Farm
about
as
that.
well.
You are not lying about that.
Yeah. No, the one game I went to this year was a Celtics game, and it was probably 50-50.
And you probably participated in that and had your Celtics jersey
Well, listen,
on.
I can't help where I was born and how I was brought up, and it's just in my blood at this point, Em. So.
I mean, come on! I should have had the PR staff kick you out. And like, that's one of my people, and he's wearing the wrong jersey. Like, what are we doing over here? But I guess we haven't mentioned, which again, like our next topic is Trae Young. But before we fully go to him, I do want to mention how he has been playing against Miami. And I mentioned the playoffs last year, the first round of the playoffs last year when they were eliminated. Like, let's just forget that, right?
Okay.
I said he averaged 15 points, whatever. This year, the Heat and the Hawks have played 4 times during the regular season, and the Heat have taken 3 of 4 games, so the Hawks have only been able to win 1. Trae, it's like an average of 26 points or something like that against everybody else, and then against the Heat it's 19 points, and those 7 points might not mean that much when you're just talking about it, but it could mean the difference in a dub.
That number right there I think is a good segue into our next topic, which is, are the Hawks going to move on from Trae Young? And that's a tough question to answer, I think, flat out, but I would ask another question, which is Trae Young a 1? Is he like a guy that you can build a team around? And I would say he's more like a Kyrie Irving type, who he's the perfect Robin, to a Batman. I think he would be lethal in that role. But when he's the guy and it's the playoffs, and he's his size, and everything's ratcheted up, it can be really difficult, And he was able to get off in the playoffs a couple of years ago for sure, but whatever Miami did last year, they figured it out, carried it over to this season as well. So it's always tough, for the smaller players to go on long postseason runs when they're the focal point of their team's offense, like he is.
Well, it's funny you're mentioning size because, like, I don't really have listen, he is small, but I don't have a problem with that. My problem is his leadership. And when I look at guys who lead teams and who are superstars in the NBA, they have some leadership component to them. And for me, I keep going back to Nate McMillan before the season started, who's since been fired or since stepped down, saying that he went to Trae's house and he was so open about this. It wasn't like he was whispering it. It was during a press conference, a preseason press conference. He let everybody in the room know, including myself who was sitting there, that he went to Trae Young's home during the offseason in Oklahoma and sat him down and said, listen, if you want to take the next step in your career, I need you to grow up. I need you to become a better, bigger leader. And he challenged Trae Young and he asked him to do these things. And that spoke volumes to me. I could not believe that the head coach of the Hawks was giving us this intimate information, that he traveled to his home in Oklahoma.
Right.
And quite frankly, Fred, when Trae Young came out, a few people later, because we talked to the whole team that day, I think he was baffled that Coach Mack had told us that.
Yeah.
Because he did not want to speak about it.
Right.
And so he did not want to address the situation. And I think Trae was hoping that was going to stay between the two of them. But I also think that Nate did that for a reason. He was saying, listen, I'm telling everybody about it to hold you accountable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing you don't hear much about is Trae Young's leadership style, right? Because is there one?
No.
Right? So he's just, some guys are just not, you know,
And that's okay.
right, not that guy who's going to, he might be more of a lead by example, quiet type of guy. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know that when this topic was proposed to talk about tonight, that I started to look a little bit at Trae's stats, not just his points per game, but it's like the advanced analytics stuff, which is, a lot of the NBA now. And in terms of usage, he's number 8 in the league, right? So he dominates the ball, no doubt, for the Hawks. But in many other statistical categories, he's more like 20th to 40th in the league, which puts him not in that top tier of players that you can just be a cornerstone of a deep playoff run or a championship level team. But his defensive rating, I looked at it, I think it was 388th ranked in the league, which is pretty low. Then I looked a little closer.
Just pretty low.
Yeah. Well, but then I looked a little closer, and he's second on the Hawks. Only Okongwu is higher. So he's got a better defensive rating than like Capella and John Collins and DeAndre Hunter, who, incidentally, DeAndre Hunter is near the bottom in a lot of these statistical categories. And DeJounte Murray, who was brought in partly because of his defense. Now, I know that type of defensive rating has a lot to do with the team defense, but Trae does sit a little bit higher than even his teammates in those rankings. So, maybe he's not as much of a defensive liability as I thought he was, because on a team that's not very good defensively, his rating is a little bit better than some of his teammates.
So you're kind of like coming to his rescue a little bit in that respect.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's a good defender,
Right.
and I do think he would be.
No, they struggle on defense.
Right. I do think he would be exposed a lot. That's another thing with the smaller players in the playoffs against certain teams. He could be exposed with switches and everything else. So you have to be a little bit more creative. I just think that if the Hawks move on from Trae and he goes to a team that already has a guy like the guy, look out, because I think that he's the perfect guy to be a complement to he can get you 40 on any given night if teams decide they're not going to focus on him. That's why I thought it was strange when it happened that DeJounte Murray he's like a 1. If there's a 1 and Trae's a 1A, DeJounte Murray's like a 1B. You know what I'm saying?
No, 100%.
So it was kind of weird to me that that's the type of player they brought in.
And to your point, I think you are verbalizing this perfectly. Like, it's okay if Trae Young doesn't want to be a leader or can't be a leader or has never been taught how to be a leader, all the things. But it's not okay for the Hawks, because the Hawks need a leader.
Yeah.
They don't have a leader.
No.
So they look to Trae Young to be the leader, and he's not the leader. True. So for the Hawks specific, that is the issue, right? And DeJounte Murray, to be quite frank, every once in a while I think, did they do this to push Trae? Not push him out, but to push him, like competition-wise, right? Did they bring him in because they thought that would bring out more in Trae, that maybe he would start leading more, maybe he would, do things in a different way? That's just what I'm saying. Nobody's ever said that to me, but I'm just wondering, because that would certainly push me. Because, athletes are competitive, Fred, let's be honest. Like, everything is competition with them. So I'm like, did you guys bring him in to see if you could get the best out of Trae? And perhaps that's not what's happened. They don't have issues with each other. I've never seen that. Like, I don't want to ever feed into that narrative, because that's not what I've seen from the team. But it's unfortunate because Trae Young is a great NBA player.
Yeah,
he really, really is.
I don't think they're going to move on from Trae. That was the question that was asked, in the topic that we're talking about. So I would say no to that. And I will also say, before we move on from the Hawks, the more I think about it, they could be kind of dangerous tomorrow night.
Oh, look at
they
you.
could be kind of
Look at
dangerous.
you.
Well, they have talent, and in the same way that I think that the Wolves, even without Gobert, who we're going to talk about next, could be dangerous against the Lakers, because the way the NBA regular season is, each individual game has, I don't want to say that there aren't really important, it seems, regular season games in the NBA. Even as it got down to it, there guys were going, if they were going to be sat on a certain game, they were going to be sat, and they didn't play. So to go instantly into the playoffs, I think a talented team like the Hawks, or even without Gobert, the Wolves have, obviously Anthony Edwards,
yes.
and Karl
They have
Anthony
other,
Towns.
yes.
So they have, they have some guys.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. Can't wait for it. I love the NBA playoffs.
And to just really quickly, Fred,
Yeah.
the reason we're talking about this is because the Ringer, I do think it's important we do mention
Okay.
that the Ringer is reporting that the front office has been given the green light for ownership to do whatever it takes this offseason to win, which includes trading Young. So that's why this topic even came up. And again, like, the Ringer is the one reporting this.
Yeah.
Nobody has said this to me, certainly. So what happens this offseason will be interesting. But you got to remember, like, at the top right now, it's all new people, right? So,
Right.
I mean, do they have any loyalty to Trae? I don't know. And Quinn Snyder, I don't know how much he'll be able to decide what's going on with the team. But certainly whenever the offseason comes for the Hawks, just in the couple months, or not even 1 month he's been here, he'll be able to tell them, like, hey, this is what I think, and whether they listen to him or not, I don't know, but it will be interesting. It's an interesting spot for him to be in, because he's not with the people that brought him in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no doubt.
Travis
like
Schlenk was the one who brought him in.
Yeah, so
So.
the different regime, you never know.
Correct.
You never know. It would be a huge haul for the Hawks in terms of picks and players if they were to trade him. I can't think off the top of my head a team that would be like that, a natural fit for him.
Right.
I don't know who has the picks or who has the trade capital to get it done, but it might make for some interesting off-season talk.
And he spends his whole offseason in Southern California. That's where his home is.
Okay.
A lot of people are like, hey, if he were to play for the Lakers or the Clippers, he would maybe be, a happy man, because he loves California.
Question
So-
is, I mean, do the Clippers or the Lakers have the
Correct.
capital?
Correct.
Probably.
question.
I would say probably not. To the
Do they need him? I mean,
Lakers? I don't know.
can they afford him? All the things. I
Clippers
get that.
might be a good fit, though, when you think about it. Like that's what I'm saying. Like, if you have a guy like Kawhi and even Paul George, and then you were able to put a guy like Trae next to them, I mean, that's an incredible team right there. Incredible.
Yeah, it'll be
team.
really interesting, but I do think, like, some moves obviously will be made, and the one thing I've learned about the Hawks in the last couple seasons since they made that Eastern Conference run was that they are willing to basically do anything, which before they were not. They were not willing to pay players, they were not willing to keep players, but now it's changed because they got a little taste of it, and now they're like, okay, we want it, so what do we have to do? So we'll see. We'll certainly see. Let's move on to Gobert. What's up with Gobert? Tell me.
Well, you saw it, I'm sure.
I did see it.
I mean,
The
Gobert
punch.
punching his teammate. I mean, as much of a push as a punch, had to get suspended. I think the league might have even stepped in and been like, you got to suspend him. We can't have guys, these kind of altercations happening on the bench during games. So
And to be like frank, like whoever doesn't know what we're talking about right now, Rudy Gobert punched his teammate or tried to.
yeah, no, he reached over and
Yeah, his own teammate.
Yeah, well,
he
if you
won't be
so the
available
lip
for the
readers
play-in
out there
tournament,
caught a little bit of what who was his teammate? Who was it?
Kyle Anderson.
Oh, Kyle Anderson, that's right. Who was giving him who. Incidentally, they were doing a feature the day before on Kyle Anderson's leadership style, something we were talking about earlier. And Gobert was on the record saying, "Yeah, he's kind of a tough guy. He kind of tells it like it is, which makes me mad sometimes, but I don't take it personally." Well, he took it personally. But and I guess Kyle Anderson was
You could say
using,
that again.
was calling him, calling him the B word for his defensive effort quite a few times. It was just repeated it like 3 or 4 times. And eventually Gobert was like, all right, I've had enough of this. And so there have also been some clips out on Twitter of the 3 possessions leading up to it. And I have to say, none of them were any good for Gobert.
Oh, I'm sure.
I mean, he looked bad, but apparently he's also injured. So
we're forgiving him?
I don't know if I'm forgiving him, but the Wolves are a total mess right now in terms of how that trade has worked out. They gave up so much to get him. They gave up 4 first-round picks and a pick swap. 3 of the first-round picks were unprotected, and the other one is top 5 protected. So that's what they gave up to the Jazz to get Gobert, along with a bunch of other players too. But I think in this case, I'm going to go with the old addition by subtraction for their game against the Lakers.
Okay.
If he was injured and he wasn't playing well, hopefully Karl Anthony Towns can handle Anthony Davis. I doubt it, but we'll see.
But Jaden McDaniels too, right?
That's a big one.
His teammate
Yeah,
won't play either because he decided to punch the wall after their loss to New Orleans.
Yeah.
So we've got two guys
that
punching
hurts.
things, people, whatever. I mean, come on. Do we need like a kumbaya moment? Maybe they don't need practice. They need like a psychologist.
Whatever
or
they need, there's
somebody
not
to
enough
help
time
them
between now and tomorrow night to get it done.
to fix that.
Yeah.
So not having these two guys, which obviously could have been preventable, might really, really hurt them against the Lakers.
Yeah, I
Really
mean,
hurt
they
them.
do still
For
have two
very
stars.
silly
They do still
mistakes.
have Ant-Man, who,
Yes.
I was teasing Alan Devlin, our resident Laker fan, that this was the passing of the torch game from LeBron to Ant-Man. So,
Okay.
I don't think that's the case, but I do like to tease Alan, so.
That's good. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Right.
I really am. All right, the Braves. We can't leave this conversation without talking about the Bravos, who look to be on absolute fire. Entering the weekend, basically, right? So
Yeah.
it was. I think they were 6-1 or 7-1. Did they get to 7-1 or 6-1? They had only lost one game up until their
Right.
second game of the Padres. So 6-1 after
Yeah.
they beat the Padres in game one, walk-off fashion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next three, they dropped to the Padres and did not look very delicious at all. I mean, the Padres looked all kinds of yummy leaving here. Because they were just like, I think they were, 3-3 or something
Okay.
like that? The Padres were.
Right, but
It's
Padres
early.
have one of the most loaded teams in MLB, if not the most loaded with named players,
Yep.
particularly their lineup. So I mean, they have Bogarts and Soto and all these guys
All
in
the
there.
things,
They
yes.
they can hit. So they're expected to be better than what they came in at 3-3 or whatever they came in
Yes.
at. So they're expected
think.
to be better. So they kind of got right. The Braves have some starting pitching woes right now.
Big time issues.
The weather was
Injuries.
cold all weekend at Truist Park. I'm making excuses now for the Braves. It's a long season. If you're going to get right, one great way to get right is to have the Cincinnati Reds come to town.
They're going to solve all the issues. Huh?
Well, we'll see.
Get a
I mean, the
couple-
Reds
get a couple
the Reds were
wins.
so bad last year. They're 4-4 so far this year. It's so early in the year, Emily, that I'm not putting too
don't
much
care?
stock. If it was
No.
a 4-game sweep and you got outscored, 37-12, okay. But it was 3 or 4. It happens. Padres are a pretty good team. I wouldn't push the panic button just yet if I'm a Braves fan. So
Max Fried's got to get healthy, though.
Yeah,
And then Kyle Wright, he was the winningest pitcher in the entire league last
Yeah.
season. People forget that or don't even know that. Yes, he was the winningest pitcher in the entire league last
Right.
season. We haven't seen him on the bump yet. So they're
since opening day, yeah.
yeah, they had
Right.
for
A minute.
Wright, for Kyle Wright.
Oh, I saw. Right. Okay. You're
Yes.
saying. I thought you were saying Fried. Yep.
No, Kyle Wright was the
Yeah.
winningest pitcher, and,
Okay.
and Max Fried though, yes, on
Yeah.
the first game we saw him, he injured his
Yeah.
hamstring. We haven't seen Wright yet.
Right.
So they're having some issues with their pitching, and so now
Yeah.
they're depending on rookies basically to go out there and
Yeah.
have their MLB debut. And listen, you're going to remember your MLB debut no matter what, but you're going to really remember it against the Padres
Right.
and the way they were like getting it done this weekend. I felt bad for those dudes.
Just to put it in perspective, after this series with the Reds, they're still not, I don't think, 10% of the way through the season. So it's such. I mean,
No.
it's such a long season. When that pitching does get healthy, they have one of the best staffs in baseball, no doubt about that. So it's just you're gonna have to little bit of a waiting game, for those guys to get healthy. You should be able to take care of the Reds. At least 2 out of 3 from the Reds, and win 2 out of 3, go on the road feeling a little bit better.
And to be clear, Brian Snicker, their manager,
Yeah.
the Braves manager, he's like, I'm not worried about any of this.
No, he's like one of the most even-keeled guys out there. That's what
he's
makes him a
like,
great
whatever,
manager.
Yeah. He's seen it all, done it all. Whether you start hot, start cold, whatever, you've got plenty of time in baseball to get it right, get it together. And if this were like the end of the season and they
Yeah.
needed these players would be playing. It's
Right.
not, they're not so jacked up or so injured that they can't play. They're just being super, super careful right now because it's so young. You know, the season is so young. So that's why these guys aren't playing. But if they had to, if this was like game 7 of the World Series, you get what I'm saying? Like everybody would be, oh, I mean, I guess most guys play injured then anyways, but
Right,
they would
right.
be playing injured, or these injuries are so small that they could play if they absolutely had to. And for Fried, it's a leg. It's not, he has a hamstring.
Right.
So it's not like it's his arm.
Exactly.
But, you know, you need that more.
Hammies, I mean, it can take a little while. So
Right.
once he's right, yeah, it's also the kind of injury you don't want to try to come back from too soon because you
Right.
tweak it and then it's
There's
another
no
3
point.
weeks.
It's still,
Yeah.
we've got plenty of
Exactly.
time. And instead, like, he's still out there throwing. It's not like he's not doing things. He's just not running.
All right.
So, you know, I have no worries. I'm like you. I have
Same.
no worries. But
What's on your mind?
on my mind,
Yeah.
we finally get to see a little bit of football. And I'm not talking about XFL. I'm talking about real
Spring game?
Yeah, real football. I mean,
be interesting.
I don't know. Like our spring games, real football. I don't know, but at least I get to get on a field, get on Sanford, get to Sanford Stadium on Saturday, and
Yeah.
watch some quarterbacks that aren't Stetson Bennett. You know, I get to watch a competition. We won't know who's starting for Georgia until 1 hour before they actually play whoever they play on game 1 in September. But, you know, Carson Beck, Vandegrift, and Gunnar Stockton. So we got 3 guys who are competing, you know, all arrows right now pointing to Carson Beck, who has been on campus now for 4 years. I cannot believe he's been there that long.
Yeah.
And put up with that and not transferred out and played behind Stetson Bennett. I mean, like all the things, right? So you would think that he's the one right now who's the favorite to win that competition. But when it comes to Kirby, there's one thing I've learned very quickly, and it's this. Doesn't matter who plays at quarterback at Georgia, because the defense is going to win games for you every single game.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be cool to have the QB competition. You know, it'll be something to watch. It brings a little more interest to the spring game for sure, and then of course the lead up to the regular season. What do we have left? About 30 seconds, 45
I
seconds,
still
something like
can't
that.
believe Georgia Tech and Georgia
Yeah.
have their spring games on the same day. Like, what were
Oh,
you
wow.
thinking?
Yeah.
1 o'clock at Tech, 4 o'clock at UGA. Everybody's going to be in Athens. I'm sorry, Tech. I love you, but why? Why'd you
Right.
do that? Come on.
Right.
Do you agree, Fred?
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, it's just
Find different
Like,
days.
just find out when the UGA spring game is and schedule it a different
might get
day.
some extra people in your stands.
Exactly. A little more coverage. A little more. All right. So what's on my mind real quick in
What
the
is
last
on your
45
mind?
seconds?
Yeah, tell me.
Might have been a much ado about nothing as far as Lamar Jackson goes with Beckham going to the Ravens. You have to figure that Beckham, OBJ going to the Ravens has
Helps.
got it. Well, he just must know that Lamar is going to be his quarterback. Not, you know, so that'll probably work itself out. The live players don't stink. You know, 2
don't.
are the first 3 in the
don't.
Masters. So those guys are still actually apparently pretty good golfers. And the Bruins set an NHL record for regular season wins. So now it's Stanley Cup or bust, and we're out of time.
But I got to be honest, I thought Brooks Koepka could have done it. I really could have.
Yeah,
And that would have
I
been so cool.
know.
The controversy.
Rom is so good,
We're
though.
being told we got to go.
All right, we'll see you.
Deuces.